go. Well, as I said, welcome to everybody. And okay, let's get started. So hopefully you're all in the right webinar. And what I do want to do, just as we go into the intros, for those who haven't been to one of our webinars yet, just wanted to tell you that we've got our final webinar in this series. Now, this actual series was a series put together from the feedback from you guys out in the audience. So both Kathleen and I did a poll, probably about a month ago or 2 months ago, I can't remember when, asked you what you wanted to hear. ROI, Center of Excellence were the top 2 categories, and data leadership was the third. So the final one will be data leadership. And we're looking to get a special guest in, because I think, debating data leadership in its entirety is probably something that's good, done properly with a few other people, perhaps. And so we'll be looking to do that on October the 28th. So without further ado, let's get into the actual meat and bones. For those who don't know me, I'm not going to read off the screen, but here's an interesting fact about me. I have trained as a charity auctioneer. What does that mean? That means I can take charities all over the world. I can take auctions all over the world and do fundraising for charities. And literally, I am the auctioneer that stands up at the front. I've been on stage with, let's see, Stanley Tucci, Uma Thurman, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jane Fonda, Dolly Parton. I escorted Dolly Parton into the press area for the 9 to 5 retro auction that I did for them, which was awesome. But what I want to tell you, which is pretty cool, and we'll come back to your obsession with Dolly Parton in a minute, Kathleen, is that I've sold the most expensive, the largest white Tuscan truffle in the world for $330,000, all for charity, children's charities, to a man called Dr. Stanley Ho in 2017. The truffle went into the Guinness Book of World Records. Sadly, I didn't, but there you go. It's better than reading off the screen, because you can do that and you can read everything there is about me. So that's just a little bit about me, a bit of fun, and I'll pass it over to Kathleen now so she can give you who she is.
Samir, that is so unfair. You did not tell me. First of all, I can't believe I've known you for as long as I have, and I didn't know that. I knew about the auctioneer, but you'd never gone through the list. And I'm obsessed with Dolly Parton. How could you never have mentioned that before?
Do you know what the funniest thing was? I'll tell you a quick story on that. There was 3 of us. We were all in, looking like James Bond in our penguin suits, and there's 3 of us. And the press lady said, "Who would you like to escort you to the press office?" And she said, "The dude in the middle." So as I stepped out, she's really small. I'm, 6'1", and I had to walk down these long steps. And it was brilliant. It had paparazzi taking. Anyway, carry on.
Okay,
we can talk about that.
Yes, a long time after the webinar, but I will insist that you send a picture. In fact, while I'm talking, you should find it and post it.
Yes, I will try and find it. If not, I'll get it from one of my ex-colleagues at Christie's. Yeah.
I have nothing quite that exciting to share. So I'll do the best I can, which is sort of my go-to. Yeah, this analytics gig is sort of my second career. I was actually a high school math teacher before doing this, but I was teaching overseas. So I lived in Costa Rica for 3 years, Mexico City for 2 years. I lived in China for 2 years. I did also, as I said, live in India for 6 months. That was after I'd switched into banking and analytics. But when I was in China, the woman who is now my sister-in-law decided I needed to be part of the family. So first she tried to hook me up with her brother, and that didn't quite work out. So then she said, well, my husband has a brother. Maybe that one will stick. And in fact, I have been married to my husband after meeting him in China on a blind date fix-up for the last 13 years. And she was very smart. She said, she told him, she lied to both of us. She told him that I thought he was so cute and so funny. And she told me, and she knew me, that he thought I was so smart and so interesting. And that was enough to get us talking. And now we're married 13 years. We have 2 kids. It's, you just never know.
She's a good broker.
She's a great broker.
Yeah.
She's a great broker. Yeah. All right, so that's about us. And then, of course, there's the whole analytics background and all of that.
There is. And I think that was, let's inject a little bit of fun into these proceedings because, it can get very serious. And I think most of the people want to see, we're not just data robots. We're real people at the end of the day as well. So,
right.
As everyone else is on right now. So thank you, Kathleen. That was really cool, actually. Interesting story. I do like the fixer, your friend. Yes. Brilliant. Must be really good at networking. Right. So as I said earlier, find your chat box. And for those people who are on today, what are your biggest challenges facing? Well, what are the biggest challenges facing your organization today in the area of data and analytics ROI? And all I wanted to do was just get a bit of a temperature check on where we are, how sort of, data practitioners are feeling, whether you're on the business side or whether you are absolutely in the data area, in the data team, in the CDO office, or a developer or whatever that might be. What are you actually, what are your biggest challenges in this particular area, seeing as it was one of the widest representation from people that really wanted this? So just drop it in the chat. Don't be shy. Agile mindset. Let's see. Agile mindset adoption, analytic maturity, a methodology or approach on how to best calculate it. Luke says valuing data in the public sector, not for profit sector. That's very interesting. Lisa says alignment across partners, marketing, LOB on the right methodology and valuations. And Rajesh says linking analytics to actual outcomes delivered. Absolutely. Rashpreet says process alignment among teams. Analytics teams are not mostly included on the business discussions. Absolutely true. Daniel says disconnect between business users and data teams. And hello, Daniel. Welcome to you. And Ranga says explaining qualitative benefits with a dollar value. Those are amazing points from everyone. Really cool. And actually, so many of them resonate with us, don't they, Kathleen?
Absolutely.
Convincing small businesses of the value of business analytics. That's a huge one, actually, because yes, Scott, that's an interesting point right there. How do you convince them to invest in order to reap the benefits of the analytics? Absolutely. So those are very valuable, very interesting and pertinent points about what is happening with most people within industries that we speak to. Most of the clients that we're continuously working with in order to drive ROI from their analytics and from their data and analytics initiatives, both, not just analytics, but, to couple those two things together. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Samir, one thing I'll add to this is, these are challenges that you and I have been working on for decades, individually and in partnership. So we've got a lot of experience with these, but I would also add, it is more important now than ever to start solving them. In the early days of data and analytics, it was just like, we've got to start using analytics. We don't kind of know what that means. All of our focus and energy was on the data and analytics itself. As the practice has matured, not in any individual company or industry, even as the practice itself has matured, nobody's really thinking about the data and analytics as the data and analytics anymore. It's about the application to achieve some outcome. In the early days of my career, I was never questioned about, hey, you're doing all this work. What am I getting for it? What's it worth? In the more recent years, it's like, hey, what am I getting for this army of data scientists and data engineers and, or for these
the investment in tools and technologies.
And it is now imperative that we begin to think differently and start to proactively demonstrate our value in terms of dollars and be able to communicate.
So interesting enough, I remember a very interesting paper from, I think it was Nucleus Research many years ago, because you just triggered that in my head, actually, when you talked about the valuation piece. And they did quite a large study around the effect of investment versus ROI. And I believe their view was, I did read two reports. So one said that for every dollar invested, you get $13 back. but they renewed that maybe a couple of years later. I think it was in 2017. The first one was 2014, second one was 2017. They renewed that, saying for every dollar you spend, you should now get $16 back. Wow. So, you know, it hasn't really increased that much, but still, you know, in terms of that outlay, those are the kind of benchmarks that the industry is talking about in terms of that ROI piece and what you should be getting back, not just from your investments, but equally from, you know, the initiatives, the driving of good quality data, to absolutely driving out your models and you know, whether it's for customer acquisition or retention or, you know, any of those specific business outcomes that you're looking for. So what I wanted to do very quickly was just to seed into the minds of all of you out there, is there's a number of ways that we could think about measuring the value of from data and analytics, the ROI. You know, how do we absolutely think about getting the ROI? So I just wanted to give you 5 different areas that you could possibly look at within your businesses, and some of these will be covered in the case studies that Kathleen and I will talk about later. But if you think about, you know, the questions that you should be asking, and you know, I'm all about business questions, but these specific questions, you know, speed to value, you know, how do you absolutely quantify the ability of the data team to deliver projects faster? You know, what does that mean to you? How do you need to get from, you know, model development into deployment and productionization, and then, you know, the whole learning process? And what do you need to do if the team is lacking in particular capabilities? So I think there's that piece that we can absolutely start to think about. The other thing that most of our clients really want to speak to us about is competitive edge. And it was interesting. I can't remember. I think it was Luke who said that not-for-profit sector. I believe it was Luke who mentioned that in the chat. So you know, in the not-for-profit sector, it's not about competition per se, but you're still competing for people and their wallet, because you're competing for, you know, the next charity, and you want them to give to you. You know, your supporters are very key in terms of the fundraising efforts and so on. So, you know, in this area, you could almost ask about, are you differentiating against your competition in what you're doing for your data and analytics initiatives? And how does that really drive the different behaviors? And then the third one, I think, is coupled with that in terms of the impact on revenue. You know, whether it's, as I mentioned earlier, customer acquisition, whether it's you know, increasingly maybe selling a product in a particular area, a region that you never sold, or if it's spend per customer, whatever that might be. But how is your data and analytics initiative affecting that? How are you absolutely on song with those things? And I think cost savings are key, because whenever we're talking about any kind of ROI, it doesn't have to be about generating revenue. It can be about cost savings as well. So, you know, what are we doing to you know, maybe look at processes, optimizing processes? How much is that saving us in terms of cost and so on? And the final point I just want to relay is probably very close to, you know, speed to value. You know, again, and closely linked to savings, cost savings, is, am I gaining or you know, saving costs by making people more efficient in their jobs? So these are the types of things that certainly we speak to people about. They come with the challenges that they've got, and this is probably going to be one of those things that we'll be looking at in terms of you know, the specifics of measurement. There is one point that Rohit just talked about. The final point we didn't see on the challenges was unable to convince our stakeholders how much value we can drive from the data. That is such a good point, Rohit, and thank you very much for that. So I don't know if you had anything on this slide that you wanted to mention, Kathleen, in these 5 areas.
Well, I've been jotting down a whole bunch of thoughts that I'm going to make sure I hit on in some of the upcoming slides. But you know, because we're looking at, as with everything, there's a matrix, right? There are all these different ways in which we can demonstrate value, but there are going to be certain things that are common across them all. And so I think we'll come into that in some of the later slides for sure.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide.
Oh, and here we are. So what we're going to talk about in some of the upcoming slides are some of the challenges that we've been grappling with, and some of the mindset that we've been grappling with when it comes to why is it so hard to calculate ROI. And there, I think we're going to hit on, you'll hear three different themes throughout, right? And so part of this is about the math. How do I actually calculate the ROI? We'll talk about that. Part of this is the initiative planning, right? So if I build a great analytic solution that never makes it to production, value to the bottom line is zero. But there's also this part that is a mindset shift or a culture shift.
Yep.
For so long, as I said, we were just finding our way. And so we just, everything, I mean, it was, you know, we had some investment coming just on the promise. I think those days are gone.
Yeah.
And because we had money coming based on the promise, we would often say, okay, analytics team, you're so amazing. Go look at our data, find me some insights that I can do something with, you know, define my strategy. And so we had this massive amount of data to dive into and to start looking at. And we said, okay, let's do that. Let's start looking. We had no idea where to look. So imagine you're mining for gold and you just start digging. What are the chances you're going to strike gold? Not very high.
Tiny.
So we say, well, what should we look at? Well, what have we done in the past? And, you know, where can we focus on, you know, improving what we used to do? Okay, I mean, there is some value in looking at that historical, but that doesn't help us get where we're going. Mm-hmm. And this search for insights among all of this massive data that we hoped would lead to information, that we hoped would lead to knowledge. And guess what? Because we wanted to fill it all out in that bottom layer before moving up, we never got to the action. You can see that arrow. When we built this graphic, we stopped it intentionally after that knowledge. We've produced a ton of data, a ton of summarized information, a whole bunch of interesting insights that people papered their walls with. None of it really went anywhere. Or maybe I shouldn't say none. That's a bit dramatic. Much of it. It was slow. It was expensive. More often than not, there weren't actionable insights that came out of it. It was disconnected almost always from business strategy because we went, oh, look at all that data we're going to start looking at. We didn't talk to our business partners. We didn't say, what are you trying to do? Where should we be looking? We just went off on our own. And so data projects are never done. New projects are always being added. You can't get all of your data, right? New data, new information, you can never get all of your data squared away before you move to those next stage. So there's so much about this that made sense in the beginning, or at least we thought it did, because we were starting from zero. We have learned a lot in the last 15, 20 years that changes the way we think about this. It has to. And that is also where now we can start also thinking in terms of ROI and how we can direct our work differently to ensure not just the potential ROI. We did go through a phase as a practice where we were measuring the potential ROI. We've evolved beyond that. It has to be realized ROI at this point. So Samir, I'm sure I see you nodding. So add your thoughts here before we jump on.
I think you've covered many things. Gordon McMaster has just jumped in and said, no one will take action on an insight if there is no incentive to do it. Often there are disincentives. Why risk a change? This makes ROI difficult to realize. So yes, I mean, it's an interesting one for me because while I think many organizations have absolutely invested in a huge amount of technology, and let's face it, you walk into any kind of organization right now, they will have a myriad of systems. They will have a myriad of tools. They will have myriad of technologies. You can probably get an ROI calculation on your cloud-based investment, but why can't you get an ROI, calculation based on your analytics outcomes that are driven towards your business strategy, which you should be able to do very quickly. So while I'm hopeful that, well, not hopeful, I know we've done it. but why is it so difficult? Not, and these disincentives, I'm kind of interested to understand what those disincentives might be, Gordon, because that's an interesting way to put it. But equally, I think we're at this inflection point where we've moved from, what some people are calling traditional BI, which was, the clunky reports, and that's dead. I think that's gone, right? We're moving to this new world of maybe some kind of automated, processing of data, some insights that are being driven, which sometimes some people are calling it automated insights, some people are calling it insights to action. We've been talking about this for a long, long time. And actually, doing this over and over again for the number of years we have has actually helped us to understand that not only is there a way to do it, but starting where this triangle starts from is the worst way to do it. And perhaps that's how those disincentives or whatever they are have appeared. And I think mixed with technology and data, and I don't think the IT and data teams have been also very good in that sense as well, to on one side where they've talked about ROI from technology stacks, and the other really has just been in the sort of doldrums, trying to build their models in the sandbox and trying to get some, basics out there and trying to help the business. I don't think we're not doing it properly. I just think we haven't followed through building the right pipelines and getting that ROI out there. We've been so centered, very, very centered on the actual technical aspects that we need to sort of, come out and say, hang on, this is actually what we're supposed to be doing. So I think from my perspective, that's what I've seen. That's my experience from a lot of the conversations I've had with various people. But anyway, let's just get on to the next slide.
Yeah, perfect.
That's yours, Kathleen.
Yes, and I just love this so much because, again, this goes to the mindset shift. This is one of my favorite quotes. I have a second of Albert Einstein's that I'll share in a second, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And, it's true. And so, I did the same thing over and over. And I thought, well, look, the potential value in this is so high. Why is the partner not picking up on it? So sometimes we're measuring the wrong metrics. I think that can also be tied to those disincentives at times. People are incented to do certain things. We focus on those things and we are not measuring the metrics that are going to demonstrate the opportunity. Flawed insights. We have maybe incomplete data. In some cases, bad data. In many cases, it's just incomplete data or siloed information. There's again, I come from banking, so I often use those experiences. The credit card guy knows a lot about credit card. The checking guy knows a lot about his product. We're supposed to be creating a relationship experience for the client, but nobody's looking at the intersection between credit card and checking and what that opportunity might be. There's a ton of value in those porous boundaries and that cross-functional data itself. And then, of course, faulty execution. And this, I think I touched on this a bit earlier, that we've got to start thinking about initiative planning as well. That, the best analytical insight without execution goes nowhere. Absolutely goes nowhere. And so we are thinking about all of these things simultaneously that help us, I think, make that shift to, okay, so what do we need to do? How should we be doing this? What are the, all of the things that need to be brought together? Mm-hmm. Samir, you have any thoughts to this?
No, I mean, that's perfect. The way you've summed that up, that's perfect. So
absolutely. And change is hard, right? Change is hard. But if we keep doing what we know is not going to work, we get nowhere. If we try something different and it fails, we're no worse off. Eventually,
we've learned something new. We've learned something new. We've tried. We've attempted to do something different. It's the things that I find incredible when I walk into an organization right now is, and I'll give you a very, very interesting example. an organization, 2 times they've tried to put in a CDO. In both occasions, they failed, right? There was no value, and there was too much focus on tech stack and so on, right? First one didn't offer any value. Second one was just looking at, building some nice tech stack, which looks like a security, nightmare for everybody. The thing for me is, if we're going to be looking at doing something different, or at least building a data strategy that is going to help the business drive out value, we've got to get value early enough. The problem for many organizations is, that there'll be a strategy that's sitting on a chair somewhere that looks like it's so long and so large that you can't see the wood between, wood for the trees. So the thing is, whenever you think about, and these 3 things actually are absolutely key to that. If you can embed the right protocols, the right understanding of what you need to get from a value perspective, early on enough, you can start to drive out the conversations which people are talking about earlier. How do you absolutely get people to adopt the notion of ROI internally? How do you persuade the business to do that? That is through, maybe it's a small test, maybe it's a very small project that you do that drives a little bit of ROI, but you can absolutely identify where it was, what happened, and how you got that ROI. And I think these are the things that we, as data practitioners, we can't go all this big bang. Oh, I need to get 50% more revenue, XYZ. That's never going to happen. But if we can incrementally do it, and we do it properly through the right metrics, through the right insights, and absolutely having the right roadmap, those 3 things are key to this whole objective that we've got. So I'm just going to pick up on a couple of things. Rajesh has put a question here. In your experience, who would typically sponsor a cross-functional insights initiative? And he's put COO in question mark. So Kathleen, do you want to take that, or?
I will take that. Yeah. And that is another one, Samir and I make an offer at the end of this to meet with anybody who would like to, because we get so many great questions, and because we could spend the full hour talking about just this. I'll touch on it, and then I absolutely want to touch on Ross's question. And actually, we have an example that gets right to a success story that gets right to Ross's question here. But
yes, we do.
It's interesting we say it that way. Who sponsors the Cross-Functional Insights Initiative? And I would say, and this might be a bit controversial, which is the best start of any great dialogue, there shouldn't be a cross-functional insights initiative. There is only a business initiative. And so if I think about what is the problem the business is trying to solve, and it's likely going to be cross-functional. I think about, again, that example I use about the checking guy and the credit card. This was actually a real problem that we worked on, where the head of the consumer bank wanted to have a relationship-driven model, and yet the individual product leads were completely incented to work within their own product. And so what happened was, we took this initiative to a higher level. We focused on relationship. We pulled it down to the individual data in the individual silos. We did the analysis. We said, look, based on some reasonable business assumptions, this is what you, head of consumer bank, will achieve if your product heads start operating in this new and different way. And he ultimately became the sponsor.
Yeah.
There was investment that was required in terms of data, in terms of analytics, in terms of business process change. And when we talk about the initiative planning, the adoption, the change management, this also ties into Ross's question. They all go together. This is a business initiative. Business initiatives request funding and investment all the time. Mm-hmm. They're very familiar with it. Data and analytics are part of that investment ask. And that's the beginning of that mindset shift. I favor initiatives that are funded by the business. I mean, We'll take money anywhere we can get it. If tech wants to give me money, I'll take it. If analytics wants to give me money, I'll take it, right? I'm going to do the best I can with whatever resources I can get from. I'm a former teacher, beg, borrow, and steal. That's what we do, right? Make it work on a shoestring. But when the business sponsor says, yes, I believe in this business initiative, and I understand you're going to have to do data work as part of it, I will fund that as part of this broader initiative. And so, but I think to that point, again, when analytics and data are new to an organization, it often will start with finance. It often will start with a COO. It often will start with, operations, which often sits in technology. So even if that's the starting point, which is good, any starting point is good, knowing that there's this evolution that comes along as the organization becomes more and more familiar with the practice of data and analytics, and the culture of no such thing as an analytics initiative, only a business initiative, that evolution takes place.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You've said it perfectly. Rajesh is very happy. I would go down equally the same vein through that. The one thing that I would say within that is that you are absolutely right about the nuances of culture and the nuances of data practitioners or data analytics teams not being able to put a business case together, which is interesting. And the business is aware of how to do it, so piggyback on the back of it. I think that's the perfect way to be. So I think that was a very full response. So we'll move forward because we've got quite a bit to get through, and we've got about 25 minutes left. So thank you for all your great questions rolling in.
No matter how much we cut down the slides.
I know. We've cut down the slides so much, but let's carry on. Let's go for it. Go on. This
all right. Okay. Yeah. I'll go through this one very quickly.
Yeah.
There's all this buzz about data monetization. So we wanted to just quickly touch on this, right? We can think of data monetization in three different ways: as the business, on the business, for the business. And so let me define our, or share our definition of what this means. As the business, this is what probably most people think of when they think of data monetization. And this is just straight up selling data. So think about data companies like Experian. Think about data companies like BAI. Think about any data consortium. Think about Google. Think about Facebook. Anywhere where you can buy data. I don't think Facebook and Google actually sell their raw data, but you can buy insights.
You can buy the insights.
That's the model, buying data. We got analytics and data monetization on the business. These are things like help me understand what my sales were last month compared to this month, where it's about understanding what is happening within the business. I haven't done objective research on this, but I think this is the hardest one to translate into actual dollars. Another example I would put in here: hey, Kathleen, what's going to be the impact of the government shutdown? We're not going to do much with the answer to that question, except probably sleep better at night or know where we have emerging risks that we have to get out in front of. But it's a little bit harder, a little bit trickier to go from a question like that right into the hard dollars. However, that type of work is absolutely the first step in anything that is around work done for the business. And this is where I think I will go into more detail in a specific success story that really very nicely lays out, at least I think it does, lays out that process of starting with the question and ending with I shouldn't say ending, calculating a value and then
getting to an outcome.
Yes. So, Samir, unless you have something to add on this one, maybe we'll go to the next slide.
Nope.
And here it is. Here's that example I'm talking about. So this was a work we did for again, a banking client. And I'll walk through the process a little bit because, you know, in many cases, if we're talking to just a business executive, they only care about the top line. Oh, okay, you helped save $6 million annually. Fantastic. But given what we're talking about here, what was that progression from the question to the dollars? So I'll share a little bit about the situation. Head of contact center, this is a regional US bank, head of contact center was running hot. He expected number of calls to come down, which means he wouldn't have needed to have as many agents on the phone. So he was way over budget. The expectation that calls would drop came from his assumption that when new digital capabilities were released, clients would naturally migrate to self-serve and therefore make fewer phone calls. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So we did what we always do. We start by interviewing the business owner, the business leader, understanding what is your problem, what are you trying to achieve. We understood that there was a linkage between the client behavior and the contact center and digital. So we thought calls would come out because people would start using digital. So that told us what data we need to start looking at. It started with that on the business analysis so that we could understand what was really happening in digital, what was really happening in the contact center, what was happening between the two, debunking some misconceptions and identifying this new opportunity to say, okay, now that we know what's really going on, we can offer a relatively simple solution. This is where we, as analysts 15 years ago, that was kind of it. We said, oh, good. We know what this is worth. We're going to go build that solution, show them what it's worth, and they're going to jump on it. And now, 15 years later, it's like, oh, it's not quite that simple. So instead, this is where we have a go, no-go decision. We lay out, okay, look, here's the situation. Here's what we could do for you based on some reasonable business assumptions. We think it's worth this much. Those business assumptions are made jointly with the business owner. And we also take into account what is the level of effort of executing the solution. Because again, I can build you the best algorithm in the world. If nobody ever uses it, it leads to zero value. So that go, no-go point is so, so critical. It is the conversation with the business owner where I'm coming in as a partner, as a specialist with a recommendation for him to make a decision. But it's actually not a very difficult decision to make. In this case, again, understanding the time sensitivity, understanding his constraints, it was, look, we can do something relatively simple. You would need to change some of your call routing practices in programs. If you can do that, we're looking at a $6 million annual save. We calculated the return on investment, and this is where I want to come back to Ross. Which part of this was the data work? Which part of this was the agent time in the specialty gate? Which part of this was the training? It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It is an initiative to make the call center more efficient. Yep. In order to do that, we make investments in data and analytics. We make investments in training. We make investments in time. That 20-fold ROI considers the hours of the analyst. There was no additional tech here. It was just intelligence and execution. It was person hours. Ultimately, it came down to person hours for the analyst and for his agents and for his contact center operations staff. So, this is now, I think that's a really important point that we're talking about initiative level. I imagine the very next question to come is, but then how do I prove what I'm worth? And this is where we get into some of that mindset shift and culture shift. This isn't one and done, but there can be so much wasted energy put into trying to bifurcate. But when you go to the head, we go to the head of the contact center, he's like, we think we can save you $6 million. Does that matter? Yes, because what was going to happen? His boss, who was calling him on a daily basis, say, what are you going to do? All of a sudden, it became very real and very emotional to this leader. Without data, he would not have been able to make this change. So was he going to give us 3 million in credit, 4 million in credit, 2 million in credit? Didn't matter. And we also think about, what is the cost? You know, even if you said the analytics team only generated the few $100,000 that it took to cover their cost, we covered our cost. You know, it just becomes a non-issue when we start looking at the numbers in this way.
I think those are fantastic points. One of the things that absolutely impresses me about this one, Kathleen, is the fact that not only have you looked at it through the lens of, listen, we need to break down the barriers because we need to get away from this mindset of, you know, what did the analytics give us? Why did it not give us X%? What were you doing at that point? Can you show me the lineage of what you did, where and when? That's the wrong conversation in all of this. The right conversation is the business outcome. What did the business want to achieve? If the business wanted to achieve maybe 10-fold ROI, actually, because of the adjustments to processes, because of the scripts that we might have improved, that actually means that, you know, we got a 20-fold ROI. So it's really interesting for me to find that base and then to project, you know, where against, and I think it goes back to the debunking of misconceptions, identifying the opportunity, because here, you know, a lot of work was done on analyzing previous encounters, previous work around the call center, and how, you know, if we had optimized processes here, what would that have done? And I think those kinds of conversations really break down those barriers and help us, instead of having the conversation. I think that's really such an old conversation now. Oh, how much are you going to give us? So, you know, you're a cost center, blah, blah, blah. Actually, we're pulling in the direction of the business. Listen, the business strategy says you need to make X. We've just given you, you know, annual savings, you know, of that much. And
nobody ever says, well, you know,
I don't want it. Yeah, exactly.
You know, there isn't this thing when we say, oh, we have a business initiative, we need to invest in this technology or buy this tool. Nobody really questions that. That's just part of the initiative. There's annual funding cycles around technology.
Correct.
The data and analytics is not different from that. It's not different from, we rely on our finance partners. How often do we say, what do we really get from finance? Do we really need them? How much was their contribution to this initiative? We don't do that. No. But again, data and analytics is coming out of it's this new separate thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just now beginning to merge into standard practice.
And I think I think the other point here is that when looking at the way that this was done, it's not necessary that we have to make huge investments in technology. We reuse assets, we reuse the technology that's there, and we might just add a small little bit here and there, but actually we really do that with the trust that we will get the business outcome. And you know, going back to the business saying, no, we don't need to buy more tech. We just need to strip down what we've got. We need to get better focused at the data that we want to look at. And we need to better, you know, ask the question of what are we trying to solve here? And I think that's the bit which is interesting with this case study. It's really going back to that. Well, you know, what's the challenge, but what's the business question that we're trying to solve? And then let's get to that point where we can say, now we know which kinds of areas that we need to look at, and we need to know what kinds of data we need, which is half of the problem, right? So with that said, we are going to go into slide 11, which is where it was a good segue into, actually, because you know, you've talked about a lot of the way that most organizations will do that needle in the haystack, that you know, everybody's trying to find gold and, you know, sifting through you know, this big ocean of stuff but can't find it. So the way that we approach it, in the way that we have our conversations with our clients, is really based on going back to that business. What is it that the business are trying to achieve? Now, here's the thing. It's not looking at it through the lens of, well, we need to put in a new CRM system. That's not what they're trying to achieve. What they're trying to achieve is they're trying to achieve a 10x revenue on a particular product, or they're trying to, do a 20% uplift in customer acquisition, or they're trying to, look at how to deploy things faster internally, which again is a cost saving and again is a way to, gain ROI. So we really need to think about what those strategic objectives are. Every single company has them listed. The CEO maps that out for the 3 to 5 year, strategy. So they're already there. They're resident. It's for us to actually go and find those things and then say, hey, Mr. Business, Mr. Line of Business, or Mrs. Line of Business, this specific thing that you mentioned in the business strategy, we can help you with that. And this is how we can help you, because we know that we can get better ROI based on simple tweaks here and there, which we've actually proved over here. And look, these are the results we got. So what we typically do, and that's why we've inverted the triangle, I think we both really love this image, because it just defines what we as business people I'm a business person, we as data people should be doing. We should be looking at it purely from the strategic objectives, working our way up to absolutely find what is the data that we need. And it's very simple. If we're looking at moving into new markets, what do we need to know? We need to know what customer base is there. We need to have a bit of understanding about the demographics in that area. So we get external data to enrich the particular kind of data set that we've got on those customers. We might look at particular, similar customers that we have in a region that is like that region, so we might think about what kind of products that they might look for. So there's lots of data points, but it all goes back to, understanding how we're going to get there in terms of the actions. What are the decisions that we're going to make based on the business questions that we're asking, which is the wisdom? What's the knowledge? What's the aggregated information we need? And where are those data sets? So it really does make us think about being more efficient in our swimming downstream for data, or upstream, or wherever it is, and finding that those data points that we need. And also, I think with the way, if we do it this way, we have a better, I would say we'll achieve a better track record when we map out what our roadmap is, because we're efficient with it. We're saying, well, say for example, we try to look at the value piece on about 3 or 4 different use cases, and it just so happens that use case 1 and use case 2 are using 2 similar kinds of data sets. We've already got ROI there, because we're not going out and getting new data sets and trying to do it. But if it was siloed, if it was somewhere else, maybe there's more data sets that we need, there's more investment, but we're being more efficient here, we're saving costs. So I think we've got to start thinking about, starting from that outcome. What is the outcome we want to get to, and working back to the data and really understanding actions and decisions that principally most business people will take. As data people, we don't ask those questions. We really need to get under the skin of the business people and ask that. And then you see, it says it there. We can absolutely get early ROI, get that value piece, because we are testing and learning on that data set very quickly. We're not trying to find it through, swimming in this big ocean. And we do, as the second point says, we are tying it straight back to what the CEO needs and what that line of business is tasked to do. And therefore, as we start to do this, somebody used the word agile. I actually think the word agility and flexibility is probably better, but we start to build out initiatives that are going to help us move quickly through the ROI funnel and help to provide that value back to the business. So that said, going to another, sorry, and Kathleen, did you want to say anything on that?
No, I'm cognizant of time. So
yes, I've just realized.
Yes, of course. Am I going to reserve it? Yes.
Yes. So what I'm going to do very quickly is just go through another case study. So this is a global insurer, basically said, look, we want a data strategy to be done. We've tried to do it several times. We failed. We've got lots of data strategies, and they gave us a whole bundle, and I, sort of blew off the dust of those data strategies and uncovered, very nice flashy PowerPoints of 350 slides. And I said, that's very nice. Put that over there. What are your challenges right now? What's the business need to do? And as we started to get into the value piece, we found a really interesting use case where there was about 10,000 customers that they'd bought because they're an insurer, and they weren't doing anything with it. They all had policies, but they weren't in line with what the regulation required, and that was linking it to a different index. So as we started to rummage through all of those things, we found this little use case and said, hang on, you've got a really, really interesting use case here. Why don't we look at this one? Try not to boil the ocean right now, but let's focus in on this. You see, you've got the data. There's probably some things that we need to do. So we started to ask the questions, well, okay, what's the challenge here? What's the business question? How much money will we get by index linking these policies, these 10,000 customers in a specific for their specific policies? So index linking, they've gone from the I think it was they were looking at the retail index, the RPI they call it, and that's what they wanted to connect it to. Now these 10,000 clients were unknown to them, so while they had their policies, they didn't know much about them. So what we did is we looked and went through that data discovery piece, and we said to them, what would really be good is we start to get some demographic data on these people. Just lifting that demographic data and applying it to that data set completely changed the way that we looked at those particular customers. On top of that, we worked with the chief marketing officer and said, right, okay, well, how do we start to think about these 10,000 customers as your customers? So we started to build these pen portraits or personas, whatever you'd like to call it. We took those 10,000 and we applied them to their current 1.5 million customers, and looking at the similarities between specific customers and then basically creating segments, those that will absolutely index link and uplift their policies, those that may, those that probably won't, and those that would just need to be binned because they weren't going to make much of it. So the thing is, here we were challenged, and that's what I loved about this. We were challenged to provide a view of, well, if you're so good, show us. So I said, look, why don't you take 5,000 why don't you take 5,000 customers, and we'll take 5,000 customers. I can see the people are leaving, so I'm going to be very quick. And we did 2 control groups. We basically built an analytical app on top of our control group. We analyzed the script relevance, how efficient they were and effective, the time of day activity, when the conversions were best. We segmented them down to age groups and realized that there were specific scripts that work with specific age groups on specific times of day. We did that. They got 2 to 3% conversion on theirs. We got 40% conversion on our 5,000, and that absolutely achieved that net additional revenue, as you can see, of 620,000. So it's really interesting, and it's not rocket science, as we always say, but it can be done. But you have to focus on the question, and you have to really work with the business to drive out those practicalities around not trying to boil the ocean of data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, and I think I'm just going to summarize here. Sorry that it's we're so passionate about this stuff, and we could talk about it a lot, and I know that our time's up. So listen, what the 4 things that I would leave you with to ensure that you are getting the payoff is: do create that strategy and roadmap. Remember that you've got to tie that back to the business strategy and ramp it up in terms of value of things that you're sure of or things that you've tested. The second thing is really know the difference between interest. Oh, that's really interesting. Do you know the word interesting, when somebody says that to me when I'm speaking, means, God, you're so dull. But that's how it can be translated. So interesting insights aren't really interesting. What you can do with them and the actions and decisions you can make are key. The right data, we've talked about that. Narrow it down, get to that right data, whether you're building a model, and also equally train the model on a larger pool of data. Don't do it on a small segment of data on your laptop, because when you put it into production, it's going to blow up. Nothing's going to work. It's not going to be as effective as it was going to be. And then know what to measure. Work with your stakeholders, absolutely understand that what their measurements are. Put those measurements in day one. Make sure you're tracking them all the way through, because that's going to show you what that ROI actually is. And next thing is Kathleen.
And I alluded to this, but again, there's so many great questions in the chat. We never get a chance to answer them all. So we wanted to make a special offer for anyone who wants to arrange an hour meeting to talk about your specific problems, to talk about what's happening in general. Think of it as free advising, free advice. I'm a former teacher. I can't help it. I love sharing all of this information and helping people succeed in everything that they do. So please, we hope you'll take us up on it. And thank you so much always for being here. It's always a pleasure.
Yep. And I'd just like to iterate that as well. Thank you for giving us your time. It's always great to have your feedback and your comments and the engagement that you always provide, which is wonderful. Please do come to the next one. We'll try and be as efficient as we can on the next one, as opposed to us, probably, doing too much on some of those slides, but happy days. Enjoy your evening or your morning or your afternoon or wherever you are in the world. And I wish you the best of days.
We'll see you next time.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.